Welcome everyone. Welcome to Launchpad Network's first webinar of 2021. My name is Victoria and I will be the MC today. So our event, or our webinar today, in terms of the theme, is International Women's Day, and specifically Choose to Challenge. And our panel, which is being moderated by Ruth Penfold, who is Launchpad's People Practice Lead. She will be moderating the conversation between our fantastic panelists today. They're going to be sharing stories of inclusion, exclusion, speaking up and challenging the norms within the energy space. After the discussion, there will be 15 minutes of Q&A. There is the Q&A on the right-hand side, so please do pop all of your questions in there and we will get to those on the last 15 minutes of the event. There will also be, at the end of the event, there will also be feedback prompted for you to complete if you can. All feedback is very, very much welcomed. So first of all, before we get into our discussion, I am going to hand over to our operating partner, Steve Cook. So he's Launchpad's operating partner, and he will just be doing the opening talk about diversity. So over to you, Steve.
Hey, thank you, Victoria, and a big thank you to you for setting this event up. Thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to engage in this with us. I'm really looking forward to the discussion with our panelists. Thank you also to Lavanya, who you cannot see, but behind the scenes is making all this work effectively for us. Vic's outlined what the topic of the conversation is today, and I'm going to keep this really brief before I hand over to Ruth and our panelists for the discussion. But I want to say a couple of things. Firstly, a word about energy and the energy industry. The energy industry is, as I'm sure many of you will appreciate, going through a huge transition from a fossil fuel base in many cases, particularly in BP's case, towards a net zero carbon world over the next few decades. That transition requires a huge amount of innovation and will catalyze, I'm sure, a huge number of new businesses in the energy space to come into being. And that's part of the purpose the Launchpad has. In fact, it's our primary purpose is to help create, build, scale, in particular, new businesses that can help accelerate the world towards a net zero carbon future. And for that to be successful, it's really all about building amazing teams. And you know, the team at Launchpad is something we've been building over the past 2 years. And as we support companies in our portfolio, we're nurturing those teams too. But we won't be successful at all if we don't build those teams and fully embrace diversity in the process of doing that. And it's not obviously just about hiring through diversity in all its forms. It's about including those people once they are in the organization, having them have a voice and feel fully part of the team at every level of the organization. That's what we're committed to between Siobhan Clark and I, who run Launchpad. And across the team, you'll find a group of people who are intensely passionate about leading the way on diversity in everything that we do and making sure that inclusion is a part of that too. So that's what I wanted to say by way of kind of commitment from my perspective and from what we're doing in Launchpad. There's no more important thing to us than building the right culture, high-performing teams that represent society fairly right across the full spectrum of diversity. So that's where we stand. That's where I stand. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Ruth to introduce the panelists and to take the discussion forward. So thanks, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Steve. I feel very blessed indeed to be lucky enough to moderate this brilliant panel of humans. But I just also, before we kick off, wanted to say, you know, at Launchpad, we've just been spending this past month celebrating many of the wonderful women that populate the different areas of our, both within Launchpad and also the portfolio companies that we support. And we're blessed because there's lots of us, which is wonderful. And I feel very fortunate that I sit as part of a leadership team where out of 9 people, 5 of us are women. And I know that is the exception, not the rule, my friends, but I do feel very lucky. And particularly with the lens that we have today and the focus on International Women's Day and the theme of choosing to challenge. And I couldn't pick a better group of women to come together to have this conversation. So you can find these brilliant humans on LinkedIn. So I'm not going to trot through their CV. You can do that for yourselves, and that gives you all some homework to do. What I'm going to tell you is what inspires me about them instead. So if we start with Sarah, we've got Sarah Millar, who is joining us from the East Coast of the US, and she's principal at Light City Capital. And she balances that, and I find this so brilliant. She balances that with also being the US lead, I think that's right, Sarah, for Diversity VC. And so, really demonstrating such versatility in being able to do so, but kind of boldly wearing her heart on her sleeve and fighting for the things that she really cares about. So everybody meet Sarah. You're welcome, Sarah. And then we also have Gabriela Hersham with us, who is CEO of Huckletree. Now, Gabby, I have known for a little while, in full disclosure, but what really inspires me about Gabby is her total mindset of innovation. And she's managed to kind of do so much within Huckletree to make sure that she's really setting that business up for success and reacting to the market that they find themselves in. And I think that's incredible. And then last but by no means least, my colleague or co-worker, should I say, Meghan, who is Meghan Sharp, who heads up ventures for BP. And Meghan, my goodness, as a colleague, I love her boldness and her respectful challenge. And those are just some of the things that inspire me about her. So I feel very lucky to be able to work alongside you, Meghan. Something a little personal from me before we start. I just wanted to be clear about this stuff. So my life opened up for me as a woman when I managed to find my voice and to find the means to speak up for myself and advocate for myself. Once I found and mastered the skill of being able to do that, my friends, I then managed to find the way to pay it forward and become an advocate for others. But as a woman, it also goes against my hard wiring to do so. So just because I've learned how to do it, it doesn't mean that that is now a skill that's just now how I operate, because I'm still a woman. So I just wanted to say that even this week, I was in a meeting where I actually was holding back a lot because I wasn't quite sure where my voice fit in it. And I'm lucky enough, as I said, to work amongst many phenomenal female leaders. And it was one of those leaders, it was actually our operating partner, Siobhan Clark, who called it out and said, you were holding back in that meeting. Why? And I realized that I was doing that thing that women do of shrinking and not bringing my whole self. So I say all that to say really that to overcome some of the challenges that women face, we need to do that together, my friends. And if you don't have those kind of accountability partners in your world that I'm lucky enough to have, then use this panel today. If you're tuning in, we can be your accountability partners. So when you're thinking about the questions that you've got for us, please think in that mindset, because hopefully we can help you to sort of find your voice and grow within your world just a little bit. So kicking off, that's enough from me. Let's hear from these brilliant humans. Let's open up with you, Meghan. And my first question for you is, what would you say the biggest challenges are that you've faced as a woman in leadership?
So you've kicked us off with the answer already. It's about advocacy, all right? And you first have to learn to advocate for yourself before you can advocate for others, right? And I believe the most important thing we can do as women leaders is to intervene, advocate for others, keep our eyes open, and question things. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about this the other day. Looking back on my career, at any given point, I thought I was advocating for myself. And looking back, I learned I wasn't always advocating for myself. And like you said, it's a learned skill. It is absolutely a learned skill. But the most important thing is to intervene. And if you don't mind, I'll tell a story about a time where I intervened that I think had a big impact. In one of our portfolio companies, we had lost an executive level hire. And so we had two great junior people on the team. We'll call them Jim and Jane to protect the innocent, okay, a male and female. And the initial response from the board and the management team was to promote Jim into a leadership position. And at first we were all just kind of going along with that. And then I felt this niggle on the back of my neck, and it grew and grew and grew. And I finally kind of said, so why Jim instead of Jane? Let's talk about that. We haven't really had the conversation. And really what came out through conversation is Jim, rightfully so for himself, not doing anything wrong, had been saying, I want the director position. I want the director position. This is really important to me. I want to develop into that role. All good stuff. Jane just hadn't. She hadn't been vocal. But then you go and talk to her and she's like, yeah, I'm interested in being promoted too. I'm interested in taking some of those responsibilities on too. And so it's a long story, but what we ultimately ended up doing was letting them co-lead, all right? And so a co-lead model can be an amazing thing that I don't think is actually used enough. And in this particular case, these two individuals who are both extraordinary have continued to advocate for themselves and grow their career together. And in fact, I just found out that they put a package together for themselves around their compensation, again, growing together every step of the way, presented it to the CEO, got it approved. So these two people have furthered their career by working together and advocating for themselves. And so what are the lessons learned from a story like that? One is listen to your niggles. That niggle in the back of your head, that are we asking the right questions? Are we challenging when we're promoting people? And I want to tell on myself a little bit. I almost didn't say anything. And my saying something changed the course of both these people's career, I would argue, for the better, all right? So one, speak up, keep your eyes open, stay alert to these diversity and inclusion issues, because I guarantee the opportunity to intervene and learn happens in just about every meeting you're in. So that's one lesson. And then I think the second big lesson is that co-advocacy model. You don't just advocate down and help down. You can co-advocate sideways and up as well, right? And this is something we all need to be doing for each other. And if we advocate for each other and support each other, we're all going to end up in a better place. So I'll stop there.
No, I love it. I love it. Absolutely. And that idea of like really paying attention to the niggles, because I find that there's so many things that we kind of just go, I kind of feel like something's not right here, but it's okay. And it's actually calling out those moments, because the more that we kind of push them down and away, we actually they don't go anywhere then. And then we end up still staying in exactly the same place. Gabby, is there anything that you would like to add there?
I mean, I think that everything that Meghan said was spot on. I feel sometimes with myself, and perhaps because I'm you know, coming at it from a different perspective, where, you know, I'm a founder, I'm an operator. I sometimes find it a lot easier to advocate for the women on my team than for myself. And this is something that I am working on and I need to overcome. But I know that imposter syndrome affects so many of us. And for me, it has really often affected my ability to be confident in my own leadership and my ideas and my worth, and to really find my voice and to fight for myself. So I think that's something that it's interesting, because on the one hand, I totally agree with Meghan, you can't advocate for anyone else until you can advocate for yourself. And yet on the other hand, I do advocate for everyone and I cannot advocate for myself. And an example of this morning is one of the incredible women who work on our team came to me. I'm not her direct report, but she kind of came to me in quite an embarrassed way and was talking about her salary and her aspirations. And she said, I hate talking about this. And I could see how nervous she was. And I said to her, you don't be nervous. You know, I'm so happy that you're here and you're able to fight for your worth. My responsibility is to make sure that what we do for you, we do in a fair and respectful way across the business. But please don't ever feel nervous to come to me and fight for yourself, because you must. I need to turn that around on myself sometimes. I think another thing that I've often found it to be quite tricky. So we're a company where we were 80 team members pre-COVID. We're now down to 50% of that size, but we've managed to retain our gender balance hovering at around 50%, 50-50. So we're 49% female on the team at the moment, which is incredible. But I've often found it difficult to navigate the bonds that men seem to find it so easy to form, that kind of bro-y culture that we know has kind of underpinned how men do business and how a lot of men have kind of interacted together, not all of them, of course, but for a really long time. But for us women, that culture is so exclusive and keeps us out of certain conversations. And so even as the CEO of a very gender balanced company, I continue to find that a challenge. And what I'm trying to do to kind of move around that is understand that men and women will always form ties in a different way, that there isn't necessarily a right way or a wrong way, and there isn't even a homogenous way of saying men do it this way, women do it that way, or men do it better and women do it worse. There's no way of defining it that way. But the way that I look at it is that the ties that I form with my team are just different, and they're going to be different, and that actually, you know, in the balance, there is balance, and that we all bring kind of different structures to the relationships and to what we bring to the table with regards to culture. So I'm trying to understand that although I won't be part of certain bonds, what I bring to the table is equally as important, in a very different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And Sarah, for you, you know, you're working in the investment world. Actually, I'm actually not sure of what the diversity, maybe Meghan, you might know better of what the kind of split is in industry-wide, but what have some of your experiences been?
Yeah, so I mean, I can give you the exact numbers because
we've
at least for the US. So the National Venture Capital Association here in the US just did its third human capital survey. So venture capital is still 77% male and 73% white. And so that leaves you with pretty dismal numbers for anything that is not a white male, and that doesn't even get into, you know, sexual orientation, where they went to school. So it's a very homogenous industry. The point that I was going to bring up is for most of my career as an investor, I have been the only. So I am the only woman on my team. I am in many cases the only woman in the room when we're talking to a company. And so part of my learning process for how do I advocate for myself, but how I also try to think of it as, if I'm advocating for myself, I'm advocating for others. I think that helps me turn it around a little bit and not feel like this is just for me and this is a selfish thing that I'm doing, but really, if I don't represent this, how am I supposed to bring a female entrepreneur into the office and have them feel safe and like we're listening to them? And so there was a very specific event that now at this point was probably 4 years ago. And I'm sure everybody knows about the Harvey Weinstein scandals, but actually several months before Harvey Weinstein came out, there was a big blow up in the VC world in the US about a lot of VCs who were acting like sexual predators. And It was pervading their fund, so the investment professionals that they worked with, the entrepreneurs that they worked with. And this was something that I don't think my fund had ever really had to face. And I remember being on our partner call on a Monday morning, and one of my partners saying, well, this is something that we now have to be aware of. And I kind of took a step back, and mind you, I was probably 6 months into the job at this point, and I had to say, this isn't something that we're now aware of and that goes away once this is out of the headlines. This is something that I'm aware of every single day, every single time I walk into this office. And if you don't have that same mentality, then we're doing something wrong. And so it really, I think there have been several instances where I have had to feel like I am the person speaking on behalf of my gender and on behalf of people who don't look or sound like my partners, because if I don't, nobody will. And so being part of the reason that I work with Diversity VC is it helps me kind of stay abreast of what is the best practice here so that I can bring that back to my fund and say, this is what we should be doing when we talk to entrepreneurs across the board. Here are the things that we need to be tracking. Here are the things that we need to be doing better from a variety of different perspectives. But again, all with that mindset of, I'm doing this for me, but I'm also doing it because it makes us better and because it means that we're a better place for companies to come when they want funding, which, you know, our job is having the best deal flow. And so if we don't get that because we're not a good place to work, we're not going to perform well for ourselves or for our investors. So it's a strategic advantage to be, you know, aware of these things.
Absolutely. And actually, I know that for all three of you, you're all involved in making sure that you are trying to encourage and stimulate, you know, all kind of, you know, essentially different, certainly in your case, Gabby, different businesses, different organizations with a focus on diversity. What are some of the stories that you might want to share about the work that you're doing in order to create that kind of platform that Sarah's talking about for others?
Do you mind if I jump in, Ruth?
Please, no, that was open to everyone. Yeah, let's make this as informal and non-button.
All right. Sarah's words were just resonating in my heart. They were just, when she said the only, because Sarah, I'm also the only, all right, for the last, you know, I've been in venture capital for 15 years now, and I've always been the only. And, you know, and what I mean by that is I've sat on 10 different boards, all right, for startups. Only one other board had one other female board member, right? I am the diversity metric for the boards that I sit on, right? And it's been really interesting to me to watch that it is slowly changing though, all right? I am starting to see more diversity in the boardrooms, frankly, because it's been in the headlines and the data has come through that, you know, true diversity, which has to have inclusion for it to have impact, is good for business, which is the point that Sarah was making. It is just good for the bottom line. More diverse boards lead to better business outcomes, better business decisions. And I think as that data has been coming out, people are paying attention more. So yeah, D&I is the right thing to do, but it's also good for business, right? And it's the second part that has been necessary to get some people on board with the concept of, you know, you need diversity in teams. What I will say, you know, where am I now? Very differently than the start of my career, where I have a leadership team now in my venture capital group. And as many of you know, BP just went through a big reinvent process where the company's been rewired, all right? So we were able to change the structure, put new people into roles, and over 50% of my leadership team is now women. Not just the team, 50%, but the leadership team, which is really important. And I'm super proud of that. There's still tremendous work to be done. We have a big portfolio. I think we've invested in over 60 companies, and I think there's only been 2 female founders. We got to do better, right? And so we have big D&I metrics in the team this year that we really want a pipeline with 50% diverse founders in our pipeline. It's the same principle as when you interview. If you don't have a diverse panel, you're not going to hire a diverse candidate. We're trying to do the same thing with our deal pipeline. If we don't have a pipeline that has diverse candidates in the CEO role, we're not going to end up investing in them. So much work to be done, but I personally feel like I'm in a very different place from a diversity point of view than I was 15 years ago. And we just got to keep it up. That's all. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, Gabby, it looks like you're about to come in.
I was about to jump in. I think that, so we do a lot of stuff internally looking at trying to, you know, make sure that we are, you know, everything that Meghan was alluding to there in terms of kind of diversity, but also once team members are in, inclusion. Our team at the moment, every single Friday afternoon, there is an allyship session, which we all sit through for 3 hours, and the feedback has been incredible, and the learnings that we are taking from it have been so strong. I think the main thing that we do in terms of how we are impacting the communities that we kind of operate within, so not on an internal level, but in terms of kind of what we're putting out there in the world, is we have an accelerator program that we've been running since 2 years after our launch. We're on our 8th cohort now, and it's an entirely pro bono, we take no equity, we don't charge any fees program that we run once or twice a year, purely dedicated to underrepresented founders. And for us, that has been such a window into learning and being able to offer support. And, you know, Ruth knows, because you've been involved with it and you've so generously supported the founders on the program. But for us, that has been one very hands-on way that we've been able to have an impact and really change, you know, what Meghan was saying about the lack of female founders within your portfolio. I totally feel that, and I see that every day, and our members in our spaces are very male-centric. So we are very aware that we need to get in there and affect change from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, is there more you want to add?
Sure. So I'm going to try and do this in a way that is not a sales pitch for Diversity VC, but so there's things that we have worked on very tactically to try and make this possible for funds. We created something called the Diversity VC Standard, which is a certification or assessment that funds can go through to evaluate what are the policies and practices that you have across HR, recruiting, deal flow, and portfolio management that indicate kind of where you are in comparison to the industry benchmark on both diversity and inclusion. We started very explicitly just on policies and practices, not on, is your team 50% female? Because the reality is most of the industry isn't there yet. And so if we had gone out and said, hey, you need to have 50% female, or we're not going to consider you on the right path, then we'd be eliminating 90% of the industry. And so what the certification or assessment does, and a lot of what CityLight has incorporated, are things like being very, very intentional where our deal flow comes from. So creating formal and informal partnerships with accelerators, pre-seed funds, seed funds, entrepreneur networks that explicitly target underrepresented founders, or that are geographically diverse, or whatever their kind of demographic focus is. If we don't curate the relationships with those people, we're basically saying we're going to keep doing the same thing and expect different results. And so the only way that we create that change is to go out and intentionally seek it out, recognizing that we are going to have to unbundle and break a lot of the things that have built what the fund was, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because it clearly isn't working. Otherwise, we would already be there. And so knowing that we have to unlearn some of the things that we have learned over the years to get better means that we have to admit that we've done some things wrong, but we are trying our best to kind of figure out the right way to move forward. And so the Diversity VC Standard actually does give funds that go through it resources as to, here's where you should look for kind of best examples of people that have done great deal flow, or HR policies that reflect equal paternity leave for mothers and for fathers, whatever it is. But it's something that we've been very, very intentional about, because that's the only way you get results.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so obviously, in terms of, when you're looking at how you're making investments and things like that, there's some really clear examples of, perhaps where we can at least start to evolve without necessarily being there. but there are still so few women in and not just clean energy, in technology, in all kinds of different spaces. So why do we still think that is?
I think one thing that I'm very conscious of is that and definitely not limited to women, definitely across kind of all underrepresented people in general, is a lack of role models. And that's something that we kind of speak about a lot, and why I think it's so important to shine a light on, people within the ecosystem who can become those role models. Is that when people can identify with someone that they see and that they've seen achieved it, and maybe believe that they may face similar obstacles, that for me it is hugely powerful. So I think that's just one thing that we've seen, and obviously a lot of it goes much deeper and much further back. But I mean, if we can shine a spotlight on the role models that don't necessarily look and feel what we expect and what we are kind of predispositioned to think that leaders look like, then I think that has huge potential.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I know for many years I've been invited to be the one female panelist at tech events, even though I'm actually not. And I work in technology businesses. I'm actually not an engineer myself, but it was the kind of just about, we can, oh, she's at Shazam, we can get away with it. They're a tech business. So, I mean, I think for me also, I mean, ultimately, we're trying to unpick and evolve societal conditioning that means that women or those who are identified by society as women are put into one category, and we're groomed in one direction, and other people are groomed in other directions. So
can I pick on what you just said, though, because you just brought up the exact point that I was going to make, which is, you said they brought you in and you are not an engineer. Why does that mean you are not in tech? It's like, that to me is part of the issue, that like there is a glorification of certain degrees of certain types of intelligence that are different for men than they are for women in a lot of cases. That's not to say that every woman falls into a box of not being technical and vice versa, but why shouldn't you be represented on that panel just because you're not an engineer? You have a different type of intelligence that is also relevant and important to be heard. And I think that is, to your point, kind of weeded out of us in a lot of cases when it comes to how do you define what a CEO looks like? How do you define what an investor looks like? And not having on that list of skills or qualifications, like EQ or the ability to form, long-term relationships. It needs to be redefined or expanded to say, this is not representative of an entire person. And so I think that besides not seeing role models, which I think is also partially a kind of a result of this problem, we need to look elsewhere for, like, who is a role model that maybe it doesn't have that title or doesn't have, doesn't work at that company, but has worked their way up and is an inspiration to somebody who is, just starting out their career. And that is representative of the journey that they're trying to take, even if it doesn't have that end kind of, stamp of approval from society. Or I'm getting a little on a soapbox here, but hopefully
I love it. And I love the reframing. You're quite right. These were quite specifically tech talks, but you're absolutely right. Meghan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just have to tell a story on myself. When I first started in VC, I was already, dare I say, overeducated, okay? A PhD, 2 postdocs. And when I was in VC, I was the technical due diligence expert, right? That's what I did. That was my box. And I was stuck in that box early in my career. And because I wasn't seen as commercial, I wasn't yet allowed to lead deals or sit on boards, I got stuck. And I had a bunch of stuff after my name. okay, that made me very technical, but this is kind of the opposite side of the conversation we're having. It got me stuck in a box. And weirdly enough, I got 2 pieces of advice. And one piece of advice was, you just work your way through it. You'll eventually be seen as commercial. You'll get there in your career. It'll finally happen. Somebody else said, just go get an MBA. Go get an MBA and you'll get this stamp that suddenly magically makes you commercial and financial. And I was like, seriously? I've already got so much school behind me, but I did it. I went to Columbia, I got my MBA, and I was magically overnight a commercial and financial person, with a technical background. And suddenly I was leading deals and sitting on boards and you know, God, I'm sitting here going, who's listening to this right now? I got to be a little careful. But the point is, it was kind of a pretense, okay? And now I am really commercial and financial, and I have all those things. But to Sarah's point, as a society, we do love putting people in boxes and limiting them that way, right? And now we're really getting far afield here. I'm with Sarah. We're getting, I don't know where we're going with this, but you know, there is something about how do we just embrace, you know, all experiences. And one of the really interesting things going on in BP is they're hiring people right out of school who haven't chosen to go to college because they represent a different, diverse view and experience. And I love that, right? They've chosen a different path than what we would traditionally expect where a level of expertise is concerned. So I think the whole education system, to really support diversity and inclusion in the way that we're discussing today, frankly, it starts with our education system, you know, and I know we can go all sorts of directions there, but I'll just stop.
Yeah, and in fact, that was a question from Gary that we had through was, does the panel think that the change needs to happen at schools and at home? Yeah.
Yes is the short answer.
Do you want to add a bit more there, Sarah?
I think that, so I did not have the technical background that Meghan did. I also went and got my MBA because I got the same feedback, including from my father, who was a VC for 25 years, told me that this was not the job for me, that I couldn't do it, that it was too cutthroat for me, and that I would be too emotional. I don't want to throw him totally under the bus. He's a great dad. There's lots of other things that he does well. But I think, I honestly think he was a VC in the 80s, and it was like, there were no women. And so it just didn't compute for him that this was something that him, knowing me growing up, I was a Spanish and international studies major in undergrad. Like, this was not even on my radar. But so to him, seeing me come from that background, wanting to make a transition into venture capital, just was like, well, this is for engineers and this is for, you know, finance people. And you don't fit into that box. And so my journey into it had to be kind of overcoming that assumption from people, which did mean, to Meghan's point, like learning to speak the language, but still maintaining who I was and what I was interested in. And that meant going into a very specific type of venture investing, which I'm very happy with. But it's not kind of, I think if I had gone in a different direction, I would have faced the same obstacles that were getting thrown up to me by, you know, partners who are my dad's age and that have those same assumptions about a woman coming into venture. So I kind of forget where I was going with this, but I think that it needs to change at home. It has changed at home for me, because now I'm like, listen, I'm doing the job. You can't really make the argument anymore. But also in school, like I was very good at math for my entire high school career. When I got to university, I was the only woman in a class, and it totally put me off from it because I was like, I don't have any peers here. And so having representation, having encouragement from parents, from instructors, from coaches, from whoever it is hugely, hugely important for continuing to build the confidence over the course of your, you know, throughout your career, not just in school and at home, but, you know, when I'm at home now with my parents, that is important. So.
Yeah. But I think this idea of building confidence is so important, because one of the things that we also do as women is overqualify ourselves to make ourselves right for the thing, right? So as soon as I took on a broader role a few years ago, I went and made sure that I studied to make sure that I could suddenly bring myself to the invisible bar that I'd created to make sure that I was now qualified to do the thing. How do, and let's take this into some sort of action stuff for the people that are listening. How do we build that confidence within ourselves without perhaps overqualifying ourselves to the nth degree? Is there a way that we can, encourage that confidence building in younger children so that they don't have to do that?
I think one of the ways that I have, not necessarily for younger children, but one of the ways that I have found myself able to build confidence is by surrounding myself with other women, or people who are not white men, because it is a shared journey. And I think one of the points that I wanted to make was, I think a lot of people have this perception of venture capital or entrepreneurship as a limited set. So there's only a certain number of people that can be entrepreneurs. There's only a certain number of people that can be venture capitalists. And so there's only a certain number of slots available. And if somebody from an underrepresented background takes one, that means that a white man doesn't get one, or vice versa. It is not that at all. That's not true in any industry. Like, if you are growing the representation, you are growing the size of the pie. And so bringing more people along with you and kind of showing them how things work, or having them do that for you, is really important for continuing to build your own confidence, but also continuing to build the success of that ecosystem. I think that one of the most impactful things for me over the course of my career has been working with female entrepreneurs that I know I'm going to be the person that is leading this deal, because I'm the one who has that network. My partners, who are 3 men, don't have as deep of a network with female entrepreneurs as I do. And so how do I use that as a strength to say, I am the person that is going to get this unique deal flow, but then I work with that entrepreneur one-on-one to help them build their business. And that creates, better results for my team and for their team. And it's a virtuous cycle. And so continuing to build that network for myself has been personally fulfilling, but also, I think, advantageous for the fund and for the companies.
Yeah, I love that. Meghan, were you going to add something?
Yeah, just really quickly. And I've noticed there's several questions from men in the audience saying, how can we help? And what do we do? And this relates to what Sarah just said. What is the saying? And I'm going to get it wrong, but something like rising tides lifts all ships. Is that the right thing to do it? And that's the belief you have to have, whoever you are, male, female, ethnicity, gender, whatever it is, you have to believe that we're better together, right? And that diversity, again, I don't want to be repetitive, but that diverse experiences and points of view lead to better business outcomes, and frankly, it just leads to a better life, right? That's just what we have to get to. So for the men asking the question, how do we make a difference? What do we need to do? We can't do this unless we enroll the entire community into this, right? Whatever groups we're forming, leadership teams forming, organizations we're forming, what I always say is they should be representative of the populations they're serving, right? They should be representative of the populations they're serving. And of course that includes men. And so all I would say is, we have to enroll them and they have to enroll us, and you have to believe that the outcome will be better, because it has to come from an authentic place, and it has to come from a place where you believe in that positive outcome. And so, for the men in the audience, you're here, you're participating in events like this. So you're already having an impact by showing you care and showing it's top of mind. And if you keep it top of mind, you will make different decisions every day that you're in a meeting. You'll start noticing more things. You'll intervene, you'll speak up, you'll advocate for others. And what I'll say is, on diversity panels, even panels like this, I love that Steve Cook's name is up there, even though he's not there, because we want to make sure that we're representing that voice and that point of view too, right? Yay, there he is. So, that's all I'll say. Guys, you're already making a difference for those of you that are asking the questions just by being here, because by by keeping it top of mind and thinking about it and having the conversation about it, it will change your behavior just naturally.
I'd love to just jump in on that as well, and completely agree with everything that you've said. I think another thing for the men in the room, something that I don't know about you, Meghan, Sarah, Ruth, but something that I'm very conscious of and notice quite a bit is that the women in any room, even when they're there and when they're represented, and Ruth, you alluded to this earlier with your colleague, sometimes we're there, but we're not vocal, and we're not vocal enough. And it can be for so many reasons. But I think, for the men in the room, when you notice that, your female team member isn't speaking up, or that other people are speaking, taking up a lot of the airspace, bring them in, ask them for their opinions, and remember that it is the opinions of everyone that make up a real diverse group of opinions in one room. And this is something that, I'm really trying to challenge within our own business. I'm very conscious that the men find it very easy to speak, and super conscious that the women sometimes feel a little bit more inhibited and are questioning whether our ideas and opinions are correct, and are not so willing to put ourselves out there. So men, bring the women in when in instances where we're not as vocal as we should be.
I'll add something quickly to that as well, that I think a lot of this is, we can make recommendations about, like, this is what you should be doing, this is how you can do better. And it's very easy for us to fall back into old patterns for everybody. I think that one of the most powerful tools that we have is just setting a structure. So this might be over engineering, but to Gabby's point, like, maybe there is a rule that everyone has to speak during a meeting. Maybe there is a rule that you have to have this many people represented at every meeting to force this to happen. Because I think there was a woman who was the CEO of Xerox, who was a Black woman, who said years ago, I don't believe in quotas. I don't think that they really make any difference. And after 15 years with the company, she realized we've made no progress on the diversity and inclusion goals that I set. And so I think the only way to do this is to say, we either get there, or we need to change something really drastically. And so setting some of those rules in place and having it be a forcing function, rather than relying on yourself to say, well, I'll remember that at the end of the day, is really helpful for just making that an ingrained part of your process, and something that will really move the needle for people.
Can I just jump in again? I'm so sorry, Ruth, it's like back and forth, but just one thing on that. I think that is so true. And I've often found at Huckletree, when we're hiring, we have really good intentions with regards to who we're hiring and how we're hiring, as diverse a group of people as we possibly can. And one of the things that we set just after George Floyd was murdered was that if we ever get to a final round interview where there isn't diversity represented, and specifically from the Black community at the end of the interview process, then we shouldn't be closing off that process, because it means that we've done something wrong somewhere along the way. And I think that if I'm honest, we haven't always stuck to that, because we've felt a lot of pushback in the room about, that's a really great intention, it's a really great initiative, but actually we really just need to hire this role quickly so that we can get on with the business and be generating more revenue and more profit. And I think that it comes down to all of us to be calling that behavior out, and actually going back to the roots of why we're putting these processes in place in the first place, and really sticking to them, whatever they are. So I fully agree with you on that, Sarah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you're really making me thoughtful, because the team has set some pretty significant D&I metrics for the year, and the team did that. All right, they came forward, they were very passionate about it, what they wanted to see from our pipeline and our portfolio, and it's a big challenge. And Gabby's making me sit here and say, do we really have the rules in place to enforce it? Are we really doing it? Like, I don't know where we are in that process. Is our pipeline as diverse as it should be? So, I think the challenge is so good. We can have the best of intentions, but we've got to learn to follow through. So I'm re-inspired to come back to the team and say, how are we doing, and how are we going to track this year? We've got to be really, really focused and determined. So thank you for that. The other thing I'll say is, there are little tricks to bring that inclusion into the room. One of the things I do, and if there's anybody from my team on the call, they'll know I do this. Sometimes I'll literally say, I want to hear from someone I haven't heard from yet. I want to hear from the new voices in the room. I want to hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet. I'll literally use that language because sometimes you do end up having a conversation where it's a few loud voices, and you literally have to politely ask them not to talk for a while so that it creates the space for the softer voices. I was in a meeting recently where I literally just fought through the awkward silence, literally sat there and just said, I'm gonna wait until I hear from someone else, you know? And so there are tips and tricks just to, and frankly, it's not a trick, it's just super transparent. I wanna hear from people who aren't talking, you know? So you can't just be, for those asking questions about how you pull those people in, you do it very transparently and say, I wanna hear from you, right? I wanna hear from the voices I haven't heard from yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We're fast running out of time, and I actually can't believe it. This discussion could just carry on going and going, but I think we've done a great job of kind of looking at, okay, what are the things that we can do kind of organizationally within the businesses that we operate in. But we did also have a question about what self-advocacy looks like and how you master it. And I think if we can sort of give some, perhaps we'll go round table and just give some more personal insights around kind of maybe how we've mastered that. So to give you a bit of thinking time, what I am going to say is I like to think about who I have around me. And I know I've learned that I need two types of people around me. I need cheerleaders that are going to go, yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for the thing. Doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. But I need challengers. So I need people that are going to ask me both kinds of different questions. And I've learned that if I'm falling back and I'm not pushing myself forward, I need to go to the cheerleader who's going to go, nah. Or if I'm about to do something that's perhaps a little bit more questionable, I need to go to my challengers and have them talk me down off the ledge. So in my toolkit, that is what I've had to create to be able to kind of grow in confidence and get better at putting myself forward and out there. Who wants to go? Anybody else? Any other specific things that work for you?
I think data works. So when I think about self-advocacy, it's about asking for, progression in my career. It's about asking for a raise. It's about asking for opportunities. And the best way that I have found to do that is to go back to friends, to colleagues, to even just like glassdoor.com and see what is the average person making for my position? What is this? What does the current trajectory look like for somebody who is where I am? And ask for that, because people can't argue with data. It exists. It is there. It is real. And so if you are asking for, listen, the typical trajectory for somebody like me looks like this, when should I expect to get there? The average person takes 3 years, and you hear something back that is different than that, you better understand why. And if there's not a decent explanation for that, then maybe you need to go back to the data, but maybe it's time to start thinking about something else. But that it's just like, there's no, I find that the best way for myself to do self-advocacy, because it's like, this is a line in the sand. There's no way to argue with this. So it helps me to have something that I can fall back on that isn't just, well, I want it. So it's, it's there.
So this is obviously a very hard question to answer, okay? And it goes to what Gabby first said at the very beginning here, that she has found it's easier to advocate for others than herself sometimes. But I completely agree with Sarah. The most dramatic strides in someone's career from a compensation and promotion perspective, you hope it doesn't have to get to this, but you can always bring in that outside offer, those things like that, right? It's market data. And I hesitate as I say this, because that feels like, oh my God, do you really have to do that to get what you deserve, to get what's valued, right? And there are times, I'm going to be really blunt here, there are times in my career where I have had to do that, all right? And it's been very effective. I'll just leave it there, okay? But does it have to be that dramatic? It doesn't. And Sarah just made the point. You can go and say, this is how I'm valued, and this is why, and this is how the market values me. But it's not just about compensation. For me, the biggest frustrations, and I think that people on this call can probably relate to me, it's not just about compensation or promotion. When we talk about advocacy, it's often around autonomy, empowerment, right? And how do you ask for those things? And how do you make sure you're getting to have the impact, you're getting to be fully utilized as an individual? Me and Steve and Ruth were in a conversation where we were talking about utilization earlier this week. We all want to be fully utilized for our talents. And to me, that's been a big part in a conversation in my career as well. So data, absolutely, that can help, but it's also being willing to step up and explain and articulate what you really want and what's important to you. And that is easier said than done, all right? To really feel like you can come up and say, this is what I want. This is the autonomy that I want. This is the level of empowerment that I want. And I'm going to create value for you if you give it to me. And it's really just having the strength of character and the confidence to do that. Because I hate to say this, but men do it all the time. They do, and they're really comfortable with it. Give me this, I want it. Frankly, they'll take it without permission and apologize later. And we're terrible at that. We're so polite. Can I please have this, pretty please? I'll do a really good job if you give it to me, right? So it's against that nature, Ruth, that you started the whole conversation with. Somehow or another, we have to get more comfortable just taking it and doing it and apologizing after the fact.
Yeah. Gabby, do you have anything to add on that?
I do, and I totally agree. And I think just kind of, going on from that, I think one thing for me that has really helped me step up for myself has been overcoming my fear of giving direct feedback when feedback is due. And I'm not talking about to people that report into me necessarily, but in this instance it's to colleagues or people that I work alongside. I'm somebody that has always found giving feedback very challenging when it has been something to do with somebody else's kind of behavior as opposed to their performance. And getting myself into the mindset where as soon as something happens that I feel is inappropriate to anyone in the room, very quickly and very instantaneously, in a very kind and structured way, giving that person direct feedback and jumping in right then and there. And that's something that I have found has helped me, back to our point about advocating for ourselves, but also advocating for other people. So getting comfortable with calling things out when they are not okay.
Yeah, I love it. I cannot believe it. We are at time. My friends, thank you so much for taking the time out to spend with us. I know I've learned a ton in this past time together, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners will have also. I'm just going to hand over to Vic, who's just going to wrap things up, but sincerely, thank you again.
It was a fantastic conversation. Thank you all so much. And just reading the chat, I think everyone also really enjoyed it. Just before we head off, there should be a poll that is just coming up on your screens now, just about what do you consider an underrepresented topic in the conversation around diversity. And you can pick up to 2, it's just multiple choice, so please do get involved in the poll, and also just upon departure there will be just a feedback form as well, just for us, just to see how you thought of our event. But yeah, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you everybody so much for attending our first webinar of 2021. There's going to be many more, so you'll hear from us again. And yeah, have a fantastic weekend everyone. Thank you so much.